냐제 쳔보도 닝미장 돈은 뭐는 쳔보 냐게다 나그라다는 잔도 셔마도 tumbato jejanla ki shomsar nishan rawar zer nishan gamsa jawar tu jishan yalaman jime banzo jala soran gongje toban por shinji lo gongje toban por shinji lo gongje toban por shinji lo.
Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. We are now teaching the Shurangama Sutra. We're currently explaining the 5 aggregates, 6 entrances, and 12 sense bases. Then we'll explain the 18 realms and this knowledge. So what we're explaining about these 18 realms is how they are the wondrous power and true suchness nature of the Tathagata Garbha. This is what we need to explain. Among the 18 realms, we previously explained the eye faculty, form objects, and eye consciousness. These 3 realms have already been completed. Previously, we also explained that it appears that everything inside discusses eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. When we taught the 6 entrances, we also explained it this way. Then during the 12 sense bases, we also explained during the 18 realms, each faculty will also be explained. But when the Buddha here uses his wisdom to analyze each point, has different key aspects. So not only is there no repetition, but it has very profound meaning. So when we analyze, or in the process of studying, we cannot help but feel amazement at the Buddha's incomparable wisdom. Everyone should know that what appears to be for each of us should be said to be dharmas that we've had innately from childhood until now. Our ear faculty and eye faculty, or eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind. Everyone has these from childhood until now. We should say we have never been separated from them. Yet regarding their true nature, regarding their wondrous power, or regarding their emptiness from the perspective of essence, from the perspective of nature, their luminous, wondrous power, we truly know nothing at all. In this way, our study of the Shurangama Sutra is extremely meaningful. So when analyzing the 18 realms, we mainly explain that originally there are 6 objects, 6 faculties, 6 consciousnesses. But among these, if we refute the 6 consciousnesses, then the faculties and objects will naturally collapse. So when we analyze the 18 realms, we mainly focus on eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, then tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness. We analyze these 6 consciousnesses with emphasis. In the process of analysis, each of us probably should also think about our own consciousness. So our 6 consciousnesses, the essence of the 6 consciousnesses is non-conceptual. According to logic and the Abhidharma teachings, the 6 consciousnesses, the consciousnesses of eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, have non-conceptual essence. These are direct perception. We call them the 5 sense consciousnesses, or including mind consciousness, 6 types of direct perception. Then how do we know this sound is pleasant, this form is beautiful? These are later analyzed by conceptual thoughts. This is very important. I've seen some great masters when they analyze. Ancient masters basically didn't analyze it this way, but some modern masters, whether in teaching or when writing commentaries, often say that our eye consciousness has conceptual thought. Actually, the essence of eye consciousness is non-conceptual. It doesn't have this, but later it's analyzed by conceptual thought. Then what the eyes see, what the ears hear, this is how we analyze. Anyone who has studied logic should understand this clearly. So I think if we want to teach the Shurangama Sutra, we probably need at least to have studied the Abhidharma and logic Madhyamaka, including the Uttara Tantra. For people who have studied these, it should be relatively easy to understand. If one hasn't studied these, this Shurangama Sutra is probably different from some other sutras. Some other sutras, such as the Agama Sutras or Prajnaparamita Sutras, are relatively simple. The eye is such and such, then the other 5 faculties are likewise. Many use this kind of analogy, especially in the Mahaprajnaparamita Sutra. Many use analogy, but here it's different. The reasoning for analyzing ear consciousness and the reason
reasoning for analyzing eye consciousness appear to be the same arising from the object side or from the faculty side, or from both. Each uses 3 methods to refute, but actually some places seem different. I won't analyze first, otherwise in a while I definitely won't finish. All right, let me go through the literal text first. If there's time, I'll elaborate more at the end. Now let's explain. The Buddha said to Ananda, "Moreover, as you understand, ear and sound serve as conditions to generate ear consciousness. Does this consciousness arise from the ear, taking the ear as its realm, or does it arise from sound, taking sound as its realm?" The Buddha told Ananda, "You should understand the ear faculty and sound objects serve as causes and conditions and then generate ear consciousness. So does this ear consciousness arise depending on the ear faculty, making it the ear consciousness realm, or does it arise depending on sound objects, then taking sound consciousness as the realm?" Sound consciousness as realm means we have an ear consciousness. This ear consciousness also arises depending on the ear faculty and also arises depending on external sound objects. So in this case, I ask you actually, what kind of consciousness is this consciousness? Does it arise from the faculty or from the object? Generally speaking, there's analysis in logic too. For example, although it arises depending on external objects, it wouldn't be called sound consciousness, nor would it be called form consciousness, because it's called ear consciousness, eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness. There's a reason for naming them after the faculties. This has also been analyzed in logic. So here he asks about how everyone should know the sounds heard in the ears. Do they arise depending on the ears or on external sounds? We hear, wow, this is a good sound, this is a bad sound. This kind of grasping at sound is called ear consciousness. The essence of ear consciousness, as just explained, is non-conceptual, but when conceptual thought is later added to ear consciousness, this sound, for example, we hear musical sounds, hear sounds from speakers, hear sounds of speaking. Do these ultimately arise from external sound objects or from the internal faculty, the ear faculty? This is the question. Then below we proceed with analysis. Ananda, if it arises from the ear, when the moving and still characteristics don't appear, the faculty cannot become knowing. There must be nothing known. If you say this sound arises from our ear, faculty arises from within our ears. If it arises from within the ears, then the 2 objects of moving and still from outside. We also explained and analyzed this before. Moving objects and still objects. Generally the ear's objects. There's one type that's moving sound. There's one type that's still sound. Apart from these 2, there aren't others. But these 2 sounds should not appear, because your ear consciousness arises from the ear faculty. So in this case, the external objects of moving and still don't appear. The faculty cannot become knowing. There must be nothing known. But this way of speaking is also not acceptable, because the faculty itself cannot become awareness. Everyone knows our ear faculty has no awareness. If the faculty cannot have awareness, then there must definitely be no awareness. So the sounds you just heard ultimately emerge because the faculty has no awareness. If the faculty has no awareness, then it definitely won't have awareness. This is one aspect of observation. Moreover, if knowing cannot even be established, what form could consciousness have? If you say the sounds just heard, if awareness cannot be established, then how could this ear consciousness have form? If it arises from the ear, the present awareness definitely doesn't exist above. Just the cause of the ear faculty cannot possibly have awareness. So if this is the case, how could ear consciousness have form? How could it have appearance? Regarding form, for example, our ear consciousness originally, it definitely can apprehend blue objects, red objects, squares, triangles, etc. It has many forms, but these forms cannot be obtained. In this way, the earlier proposal that it arises from the ear faculty cannot be established. Analyzing further, still using the ear faculty to analyze, if you maintain ear hearing, since there's no moving or still, hearing has no establishment. If you still want to say, I still maintain ear hearing of sound, it's not anything else. What my ears hear, if he insists on saying I hear depending on the ear faculty, then in this case, because there are no external sound objects of moving and still, where would the ear faculty have them? It doesn't, because there are no sound objects of moving and still your hearing has no establishment. Your so-called hearing just now, because it has absolutely no relationship with external sounds. If it has absolutely no relationship, you're just speaking words. Actually, your true hearing has no establishment, cannot be established. Since you cannot establish it, why would ear form mixed with form and touch objects be called consciousness realm? Then why would your ear is a piece of flesh. Everyone knows. Some people's ears are very big. Some people's ears are very small. It seems like everyone's ears are. That day we had a meeting in Chengdu and they took photos from behind. Some people said, although you can't see my face, you can tell who I am from my ears because in that photo I was only in profile. Then they said from the ears you should be able to tell who you are. It should be you, they said. So sometimes the shape of ears can also recognize what this is. Generally speaking, if ears are relatively large, it's said the merit is relatively great, just like the Buddha. There's this saying, regardless if we insist on using the ear faculty to hear. Now there's no sound because there's no moving, and still actually this hearing is not established. Moreover, your ear's form mixed with form characteristics, mixed with the body's form, touch objects called consciousness, meaning actually you say the ears hear. If ears hear, your ear is an ear faculty, such a lump of flesh, a piece like a tree leaf. This is actually part of the body. It's mixed with body form. So if it's part of the body, then the touch objects that the body contacts. Regarding our ears, originally their objects should be sound objects. Sound, but my ear is part of the body, so mixed together with sound objects. If mixed together with sound objects, it becomes touch objects. These sound object touch objects, if they're sound object touch objects called consciousness realm, then how could this become the realm of ear consciousness? Because among the 18 realms, what we need to determine now is ear consciousness. If your ears hear, ears are part of the body. So in this case, this ear is actually a form characteristic of the body, body form characteristics. The object they contact are actually touch objects. If they're touch objects, then the consciousness you bring about, the consciousness produced, should be body consciousness, not ear consciousness, called consciousness. How could it become your ear consciousness? It should become body consciousness, not ear consciousness. Then from where would the ear consciousness realm be established? So if it becomes body consciousness, how is your ear consciousness established? Because you said ear consciousness arises from the ear faculty. But when we observe, actually the ear is part of the body. If it's part of the body, its object is touch objects. If touch objects, then depending on touch objects and body, these two combined result in body consciousness, not ear consciousness. So in this way, if you truly hear with ears, how is your ear consciousness established? How is it formed? The Buddha is truly very skillful. Just on this ear, he analyzes so many problems. We still admire this very much, right? Everyone has had ears since childhood, but has never thought about this. I haven't thought about it. You might have thought about it often, thinking, the sounds I hear, do they come from inside my ears? But in this way, you see ear consciousness is also not established. This is the first aspect of observation. Just now, does it arise from the ear faculty or from sound? Now this is the second aspect of arising. If it arises from sound, consciousness exists because of sound, then it's unrelated to hearing. The following is a bit more difficult to understand. Everyone needs to pay attention. Open your ears. If you say that earlier hearing ear consciousness, that consciousness awareness heard by the ear should come from external sounds, come from sounds heard outside, then in this case, this sound, consciousness exists because of sound. Then this ear consciousness should only exist when there's sound. So if it only exists because of sound, it has nothing to do with your own ear faculty, with you personally, no relationship. Then it's unrelated to hearing. Because originally we depend on my ears to hear sounds. But if this hearing comes from external sounds, then sound itself starts to have hearing. So your personal body and personal ear faculty have no relationship. What relationship would you have? There would be no relationship. If there's no hearing, then the sound characteristics have no place to exist. If you have no hearing, then what happens? The sound characteristics are already gone because you just said it arises from external sounds. If it arises from sound, then it has nothing to do with you. If you have no hearing, then where exactly are the sound characteristics? There's no place for them. For example, can you hear this kind of sound? If you can't hear it, then where exactly is this sound? How would you know? There's fundamentally no way to distinguish why can't deaf people hear sounds? Because they can't hear sounds. If ear consciousness comes from external sounds, if this ear consciousness comes from sound, then it has nothing to do with you. If it has nothing to do with you, you definitely can't hear. If you can't hear, then where are the sound characteristics? You fundamentally don't know. Because when we listen to teachings, someone speaks in the hall and then there's this sound. After there's this sound, I hear it. After hearing it, oh, this sound characteristic is what exactly was said. We immediately receive its characteristics. But if ear consciousness comes from sound, then your ear faculty has no relationship. If your ear faculty has no relationship, you can't hear. If you can't hear, then where exactly are these sound characteristics? There's no place for them. It's impossible to have such a thing. If consciousness arises from sound, you must accept that sound exists because of hearing and has sound characteristics. If this ear consciousness comes from, didn't they keep saying it arises from external sounds? Ear consciousness doesn't arise from the ear faculty because the ear faculty has already been refuted. If you say it arises from sound, then what should you accept? You must accept that sound exists because of hearing and has sound characteristics. Because you have hearing, then you have sound characteristics. If you say it arises from sound, then for so-called sound to be established, you first have hearing, then you have sound characteristics. It should be this way. If it's this way, hearing should hear consciousness. If there's no hearing, it's not a realm. If you say it arises from sound, then definitely you need hearing first to establish sound. So if this is the case at that time, you should hear. What should you hear? You should be able to hear your hearing consciousness, your ear consciousness. Why? Because your hearing arises from sound. If hearing arises from sound, then this hearing definitely has consciousness, ear consciousness. Without ear consciousness, it's impossible to hear. If there's ear consciousness, you have conditions within sound. So in this case, when I hear sound, I should be hearing ear consciousness, not hearing sound, because hearing must have the involvement of consciousness. If there's no involvement of consciousness, there's no way to hear. So in this case, if you say it arises from sound, then I not only need to hear sound, but also need to hear ear consciousness. I hear ear consciousness. If you say I have no hearing, then there's no hearing, no hearing. If there's no hearing of ear consciousness or no hearing of sound, then it can't be established as a realm. Because without hearing here, whether it's the ear faculty or sound objects or consciousness realm, the consciousness realm of ear consciousness, these three have a close relationship with your hearing. If you have no hearing, then among the 18 realms, the realms here cannot be established. If there's hearing, then it's the same as sound. Consciousness has already been heard. If you say there's already hearing, if there's hearing because you want to have hearing, didn't you just say it arises from sound? If it arises from sound, then your ear consciousness becomes like sound. Consciousness has already been heard, being the object of hearing. Originally, our consciousness is the one that hears. But if you say it can be heard, then this sound should have ear consciousness. And this ear consciousness becomes the object of hearing. So in this way, who knows the hearing consciousness? Who knows this ear consciousness that can hear? If your consciousness becomes what is heard like sound as an object, then how can there be something that hears? If there's no knower, ultimately it's like grass and wood. If you say this hearing has no awareness, if it has no awareness, then your ability to hear has already become without awareness, just like grass and wood. So above this place is a bit convoluted, but as long as you understand this reasoning method, it should be no problem. Why does this fault arise? When we hear sounds, we should hear ear consciousness, this fault, because the other party has already accepted this ear consciousness comes from sound. If ear consciousness comes from sound, then is there hearing or not? You say there's hearing, if there's hearing. At that time, my ear consciousness and ear faculty don't get involved. There's hearing within sound. If there's hearing within sound, then hearing definitely has consciousness. Otherwise, without consciousness, there's no way to hear. If there's consciousness when I want to hear, I'm not hearing sound. I should be hearing this consciousness. This consciousness becomes my object. Just like someone with divine ear power, they can also hear their own ear consciousness and can also know others' ear consciousness, grasping at sounds. It's like this. So the other party has no choice but to accept. In the end, you have to accept. If ear consciousness comes from external sounds, there are such faults. Understand? I've already explained. If you don't understand, there's nothing I can do. Generally, I basically understand, but this is a bit laborious. Reasoning is like this. If you exercise your minds a bit more, it should be no problem. If you don't understand, ask each other again or something. Some seem to me like our reactions here are relatively fast. Some understand after hearing twice. Some understand after hearing 3 times. Some understand after hearing 5 times. Then we'll see. During the discussion sessions below, or look again. Below he says, you shouldn't say sound and hearing mix to form an intermediate realm, because previously we refuted arising from the ear faculty, then refuted arising from sound, then refuted arising from the combination of ear and sound. Below, the third should refute arising from combination. You shouldn't say sound and hearing mix to form an intermediate realm. So because we previously separately refuted arising from the ear faculty, then also refuted arising from sound. So in this case, you shouldn't say ear consciousness in sound objects and ear faculty here. Hearing refers to the ear faculty mixed together. These two mixed together then in between becomes ear consciousness. This is not possible, because if it's the previous ear consciousness, then this ear consciousness has one part facing sound objects, one part facing the ear faculty. So what exactly does ear consciousness refer to? When we observe this way, there's no middle position. Realms have no middle position. Then how can internal and external characteristics be established? If neither the internal ear faculty nor external sound objects can be found, then how can this ear consciousness be established? Just like in Madhyamaka, we often also observe there's no self in external objects, and there's also no self in mind. If there's also no self in between, where exactly is the self? It's the same regarding so-called ear consciousness. We just now didn't find it in sound, didn't find it in the ear faculty. Besides the ear faculty and sound, there are no other causes and conditions for arising. So in this way, this ear consciousness cannot be established even by combining faculty and object. This refutes arising from combination. Just now we refuted arising from sound. Then refuted arising from ear faculty. Therefore you should know, ear and sound as conditions generate ear consciousness realm. So we should know, as said at the beginning, the causes and conditions of ear faculty and sound objects producing so-called ear consciousness realm. All 3 places are empty. From the perspective of consciousness's own essence, it's truly not there. From the perspective of ear faculty's essence, it's also not found. Then searching in sound object's essence is also unobtainable. In this way, all 3 places are empty. So in this case, then ear and the sound realm, these 3. Sound realm should refer to ear consciousness realm. Here, sound realm, generally in logic, ear faculty and external sound objects, plus ear consciousness. But sometimes here, it seems sound realm actually means ear consciousness realm, the consciousness realm produced by ear faculty and sound combined. These 3 fundamentally neither from causes and conditions nor from natural existence. This principle is the same as before. In essence, they all neither arise from causes and conditions nor from non-causes and conditions, but actually the indestructible wondrous power of Tathagata Garbha, we can say, should not be denied. It should exist. These are the sounds we hear. We are also now, everyone is listening to sounds. Sometimes fellow practitioners also work quite hard listening from morning until evening. When finally returning, the ears are all buzzing. But today the Shurangama Sutra says, what exactly do we hear? ear, nothing at all. No sound has ever arisen from within the ear faculty. No sound has ever arisen from within sound either. So our ear consciousness is gone. In a while, when you go back, think about it. Actually, we've never heard any sounds because sound is now unobtainable. If sound is unobtainable and ear faculty is unobtainable, then the resulting ear consciousness, thinking it's this or that consciousness aggregate, also doesn't exist. Indeed, on the ultimate level, all these are unobtainable. If we want to understand emptiness by analyzing through this method, actually these principles, if someone has no faith at all, some worldly philosophers, theoretical scholars analyzing for them should also be possible. If some of us feel something in Buddhism is not good, then I ask you, can you hear sounds or not? Is what hears sound ear consciousness or not? If it's consciousness, does your consciousness arise from external sounds or does it arise from within your ears? In this case, the other party might finally have no way out and talk nonsense. Otherwise, if truly analyzing with reason, I feel there's no way to surpass the Bhagavan's wisdom. Next, below, there's another such principle. The ear consciousness just discussed is finished. Below, we'll discuss nose consciousness. Ananda, moreover, as you understand. Nose and fragrance as conditions generate nose consciousness. Then the Buddha said again, Ananda, you should also understand. Now you see Ananda says nothing, just keeps listening. He's so quiet. It's a bit unusual. Before he would speak every so often. Now he keeps not speaking for a long time. He's been in retreat for a long time, keeps not speaking, but he's definitely there. Otherwise the Buddha couldn't possibly keep saying Ananda every so often. Moreover, as you understand, nose and fragrance as conditions. The fragrance smelled by the nose. No, he says, generate nose consciousness. The nose faculty and fragrance objects as causes and conditions then generate nose consciousness. Does this consciousness arise from the nose, taking nose as its realm, or arise from fragrance, taking fragrance as its realm? This reasoning should be the same. So the nose consciousness we smell, does it arise depending on the nose faculty becoming nose consciousness realm? Or does it arise depending on fragrance objects also becoming fragrance consciousness realm? In our logic, generally, fragrance consciousness realm probably wouldn't be said this way. Generally, it's nose consciousness, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, like this. It seems in logic there's one. Why isn't it named after the object? Why, when it equally arises from object and faculty, is it named after the faculty? It seems it's in the treasury of valid reasoning, right? Abhidharma, right? Why? I forgot. I'll study the Abhidharma again in the next life. The Abhidharma is sometimes very useful. Should memorize the Abhidharma, that would be better. It's this, taking fragrance as realm, saying your nose consciousness arises depending on fragrance or arises from nose. Ananda, if it arises from nose, then in your mind, what do you take as nose? If the other party says, my nose consciousness. We should all know our nose consciousness just now. The incense smells pleasant. Very good when you go to the toilet. It's very smelly. This consciousness, this kind of consciousness, does it arise from the nose faculty or from external objects, fragrance objects? This fragrance, Chinese fragrance objects are a bit troublesome. Sometimes it's very fragrant. Sometimes it's fragrance of fragrance objects. When it's fragrance of fragrance objects, it includes both bad smells and good fragrances. It seems easy to get confused. When I first started, I couldn't distinguish clearly either. So if you say it arises from your nose faculty, then Ananda, what do you think? What do you think in your mind? What do you take as nose? What exactly is your nose faculty? Don't you say this fragrance or bad smell arises from the nose faculty? Then you need to tell me what your nose faculty is. Do you take the flesh form with double claw characteristics? Or do you take the smelling and knowing moving nature? He asked two questions. These two questions are analyzed in more detail below. Everyone should remember, what exactly is your nose faculty? Do you take the flesh form? We call them nostrils, the sides of the nose. Like wings, those nostrils, or they're called double claws, meaning our nose-shaped flesh mass. Don't you say it arises from the nose faculty, that fragrance arises from the nose faculty. Then your so-called nose faculty arises from this double-winged flesh mass. Or do you take the smelling sense of smell, the function of moving sense of smell, its capability? This is very important because he says it arises from the nose faculty. Nose consciousness is from the nose faculty. So regarding nose faculty, does it arise from the flesh or does it arise from its awareness? Arising from the nose's awareness. Actually, the nose's awareness should be nose consciousness. But when he analyzes here, he divides it into two aspects. If you take flesh form, flesh is body. Body knowing is touch. Named body, not nose. Named touch is objects. The first small question, he says, if you use the earlier double claws or nostrils, then this nose, our current nose, some are big noses, some are small noses, some have very, very small noses. When laughing, he he, their noses are all very, very small. Some have those big noses, especially that type. But regardless, if it arises from your nose form, then nose form is actually my body, it's flesh, it is body. And body knowing, the body's awareness is actually tactile sensation. So in this case, it's named body, not nose. And its name is touch objects, not fragrance objects. Everyone knows this, refuting in this way. So the Buddha sometimes runs to refute from this side, runs to refute from that side. We sometimes have difficulty grasping the fundamental point. When we say nose, we definitely also say nose faculty, because in the Abhidharma, the nose faculty also has form. Floating dust faculty, right? It has both floating dust faculty and ultimate faculty. But this faculty, the tongue faculty, is like a half moon. The eye faculty is like sesame flowers. What is the nose faculty? Copper tube, copper needle, right? Right, they have different shapes. I've really forgotten the Abhidharma now. Somewhat. I initially wanted to translate the great commentary on Abhidharma, but it seems one lifetime isn't enough. So if you say it's the nose is actually the body, flesh. If it's flesh, then it becomes body faculty, not nose faculty. If it arises from body faculty, it's body consciousness, not nose consciousness. In this case, it's unreasonable. The nose has no name yet. How can a realm be established? If here, nose consciousness, if the nose faculty fundamentally can't be found and gets no name, then how could you obtain consciousness arising depending on the nose faculty? It fundamentally can't be found. The first one just discussed. Do you take the flesh form with double claw characteristics? This is divided into three aspects. First, if you say the nose faculty uses double claw characteristics, if this is used to generate, it becomes body faculty. So nose consciousness can't be established. This is the first aspect of observation. Then below, the second says it arises from my nose faculty, but depends on the nose's sense of smell to generate nose consciousness. If sense of smell generates nose consciousness, then what follows is also unreasonable. How is this unreasonable? If you take smelling and knowing, again in your mind, what do you take as knowing? So in your mind, what do you think exactly? What is awareness? If I use sense of smell to know, then in your mind, what is this sense of smell within the nose like? Below this is analyzed from three aspects. That sense of smell just mentioned is analyzed from three aspects. First, considering that regarding that sense of smell, taking flesh as knowing. If it's inside the nose, isn't there flesh inside the nose, depending on the flesh's awareness inside the nose? If depending on the nose, flesh's awareness, then flesh's knowing is originally touch, not nose. This is exactly the same analysis as before. If it's related to the flesh inside the nose, then flesh is body, so body's awareness. Regarding body's awareness, it's definitely originally all touch objects, not nose faculty. or nose consciousness. This is unavoidable. So first, if you say it's related to flesh, then it's not established. Second aspect, although my sense of smell, but this sense of smell, isn't there some space inside the nose? If there's some space that kind of gas enters the nostrils, then I can sense it. So if using space to be aware, that's also unreasonable. Second problem, taking space as knowing inside the nose, although using the nose to smell. But if smelling with the empty space is awareness inside the nose, that's also unreasonable. Space would know itself. Flesh should be without awareness. In this case, the flesh inside your nose shouldn't have sensation because this is space knowing. If space knows itself, then your flesh shouldn't have awareness without awareness. If so, then space should be you, your body, without knowing. Today, Ananda should have no location. If you say you know through space, then your body should have no awareness. If the body has no awareness, then space should become you. Ananda, in this case, your body has no awareness. Your original body has no awareness. Now space becomes you. Everyone should understand this because he says the space inside the nose has awareness. If the space inside the nose has awareness, then your body shouldn't have any awareness. If the body shouldn't have awareness, Ananda, can you smell that gas? If you say you smell gas, you've already explained, you said you smell using space, then you become space. If you become space, your original body has no awareness. In this case, today you, Ananda, have no dwelling. You yourself have already become space. Space should have no dwelling. So in the end, after all this discussion, you, Ananda, fundamentally don't exist. Even if you exist, you become space. Ethereal and insubstantial. In this case, you can't accept if you, Ananda, depend on the nose faculty. You've clearly experienced fragrances. So how to explain this contradiction? This is the second aspect of observation. Didn't we just say, if using nose smelling and knowing that won't work, knowing through flesh or knowing through space or knowing through fragrance, below is inside the nostrils, don't we often have that kind of fragrance sensation? Depending on the nose, it has a kind of fragrance sensation, awareness of fragrance. If knowing through this, it's also unreasonable, taking fragrance as knowing. If you say you know through fragrance, knowing belongs to fragrance, you should know actually fragrance belongs to the object. Fragrance objects. What relationship does it have with you? Because fragrance is the object's fragrance objects. It has nothing to do with you, nothing to do with you, Ananda, nothing to do with your body. Because fragrance ultimately belongs to fragrance objects. No relationship. If fragrant and foul odors must arise from your nose, then those fragrant and foul, two kinds of flowing gas, would not arise from Ananda and Sandalwood. If fragrance can know, then foul odor and fragrance, then you, Ananda, should be able to produce foul odor and fragrance. In this way, the foul odor and fragrance, this kind of emanating gas, shouldn't be what? It shouldn't arise from Ananda and Sandalwood. Originally, we all know regarding foul odor, it should be Ananda. Ananda is said to grow on Malabar Mountain, a kind of particularly foul-smelling kind of wood, and it appears to have red flowers that look quite nice, but if you eat it, you'll die immediately. Such a poison, that poison is also particularly foul. Within 40 yojanas, foul odor fills the sky. Then sandalwood is Malayan or snakeheart sandalwood. That one has particularly good taste, good fragrance. So if this fragrance is the consciousness that knows through smelling odor is fragrance, then not depending on sandalwood, not depending on Ananda, not depending on these. Because once you have them, all these arise naturally. If these two don't come, you smell your own nose. These two, the sandalwood and Ananda just mentioned, one is pleasant smelling, one is unpleasant smelling, but if these two don't come, you should have nose smelling. You yourself have such fragrant or foul, but do you truly have fragrant and foul? Do you truly have them? Actually, if they truly have inherent characteristics, then it's possible. One exists, one shouldn't exist. Foul is not fragrant, fragrant is not foul, because if they truly have inherent characteristics, then foul odor in the nose faculty, because it already exists. In this case, it can never have fragrance. If there's fragrance, then in your nose faculty, there can never be foul odor. If both fragrant and foul can be smelled, then you, one person, should have two noses. If they have inherent characteristics, one is fragrance, one is foul odor. If both are smelled by one person, then you, one person, should have two nose faculties. If two nose faculties, there should be two nose consciousnesses. If two knows consciousnesses, one person becomes two persons. When asking me questions, there would be two Anandas. If you became two persons, then you, Ananda, who asked me questions, should also be two, because you have two knows consciousnesses. If you have two knows consciousnesses, then this questioner who asks me, Ananda, should also be two. Actually, this isn't accepted either. Who would be your essence? What exactly is your true Ananda like? Today, Ananda, the Buddha sometimes turns him into space, sometimes turns him into two Anandas. Now Ananda doesn't dare say anything. Pushing him back and forth, today Ananda has become sometimes turned into space existing nowhere. Sometimes Ananda becomes two people. Like this today, Ananda probably can't even sleep. Everyone should understand this reasoning method, because the other party accepts knowing through fragrance. If knowing through fragrance is ultimately an object, if it's an object, if fragrance has two natures of foul and fragrant, then when we have fragrance or foul odor, the nose has two nose consciousnesses. If two nose consciousnesses, then it's the same as our earlier reasoning, without inherent nature, sometimes smelling a fragrance, sometimes smelling a foul odor. This doesn't count. So truly having inherent characteristics, if arising from such objects, there's this fault. If the nose is one, if our nose consciousness is one consciousness, then in this case fragrance and foul have no duality. If fragrance and foul have no duality, foul becomes fragrance, fragrance becomes foul, two natures don't exist. If this is the case among these two natures, where does nose consciousness arise? Because regarding nose consciousness, nose realm should be one kind of realm. This realm is impossible. You just said it arises from fragrance. The fragrance here relates to that earlier awareness. So the fragrance below the fragrance in the very first section, these are different. When you distinguish, as I just explained, that smelling and knowing is divided into three aspects. One arises from flesh, one arises from space, one arises from fragrance. Three aspects. Then now below is the major section. Just now, ultimately, does our nose consciousness arise depending on the nose faculty, or arise depending on fragrances? Now it's fragrance objects. So its major section is here, the second. If our nose consciousness arises because of fragrance, consciousness exists because of fragrance, and generally speaking. Nose consciousness depends on fragrance to exist, because it doesn't use the faculty either, just nose consciousness depending on external fragrance. For example, incense burner or unclean feces. Actually in this, when it's fragrance objects, those fragrance objects literally we see as if fragrance is fragrant things, but here in the object's fragrance, both foul fragrance and pleasant fragrance exist. So in Chinese, sometimes it seems it's not like this in Tibetan. I was a bit confused at first regarding fragrance. I thought it's always fragrant, but this fragrance includes foul fragrances. It's like this. So if you say this kind of nose consciousness arises depending on fragrance objects, then he gives an analogy here. This consciousness should exist because of fragrance. If this is the case, it's like the eye has sight but can't observe its own eye. We know the eye can see, it can see others, but the eye itself can't see itself by the same principle. You just said nose consciousness arises depending on fragrance. If it arises depending on fragrance, because it exists due to fragrance, because your nose consciousness exists depending on fragrance, it should not know fragrance, because fragrance is generally like the eye. Just now it sees others but can't know itself depending on the eye. There can be eye consciousness. By the same principle, if arising depending on fragrance, this fragrance consciousness can't know fragrance, exactly the same as the eye just now. Fragrance consciousness shouldn't know fragrance. If your nose consciousness doesn't know fragrance, that would be quite ridiculous, impossible. If there's knowing, it's not arising. If not knowing, it's not consciousness. If the consciousness that knows fragrance hasn't arisen, if knowing fragrance hasn't arisen, not knowing is not consciousness. I see this, if there's knowing, it's not arising. Right, if you have awareness, that earlier fragrance knowing, because it arises depending on fragrance. If it truly has awareness, it can't possibly arise from fragrance. If you say it doesn't know, then nose consciousness lacks the characteristics. Your nose consciousness arising from fragrance, does it have awareness or not? If you say it has awareness, then it can't possibly arise from fragrance, because fragrance is an object. If you say it has no awareness, then you can't establish it as nose consciousness. Fragrance has no knowing. Fragrance realm can't be established. In this case, fragrance actually shouldn't have awareness, because fragrance is ultimately fragrance objects. Objects like our sounds, they have no awareness, no consciousness. The earlier form objects also have no awareness. By the same principle, fragrance has no knowing. Fragrance realm can't be established. If fragrance realm has consciousness, also fragrance consciousness realm can't be established. If consciousness doesn't know fragrance, then consciousness realm can't be established from fragrance. If you say nose consciousness doesn't know fragrance, then how can nose consciousness realm be established from fragrance? Because generally nose consciousness depends on knowing fragrance, then establishes nose consciousness. If you say this consciousness fundamentally doesn't know fragrances, whether bad fragrance or wonderful fragrance, then nose consciousness has no way to be established as a realm. It can't be established as a realm among the 18 realms. Above this, we just refuted arising. Depending on nose faculty is also not established. Arising depending on the nose faculty's object, fragrance objects, is unreasonable. Then below, we refute arising from combination. That is, object and faculty both arising together is also unreasonable. How is this? Since there's no middle, internal and external can't be established. Since faculty is also not established just now, and object, that is fragrance objects, are also not established, then having a nose consciousness in between is even more impossible. No middle. So internal and external can't be established. External fragrance objects can't possibly be established. Internal faculty, that is nose faculty, is also not established. All those smelling natures are ultimately illusory. In this way, our usual use of nose faculty to smell fragrances, this kind of statement is merely conventional in an unexamined situation, obtained like dreams and illusions. Actually, when truly observing like above, it's ultimately illusory, it's conventional. So the final summary, therefore you should know nose and fragrance as conditions. Generate nose consciousness realm. All three places are empty. So through the above observations, nose faculty and fragrance objects as causes and conditions producing so-called nose consciousness realm is actually from three aspects: from the faculty level, from the object level, from the consciousness level. Observing these three places, finally they're unobtainable, just like a barren woman's sun and flowers in space, exactly the same. In this way, then nose and fragrance realm, these three, so nose faculty and fragrance objects and fragrance realm. The fragrance realm here should refer to nose consciousness. Fragrance realm or nose consciousness realm. These three fundamentally neither from causes and conditions nor from natural existence. Good, let's stop here.
Bandara Banma Sodargye